Shalom Ukalam, welcome everybody. We're in Hilchot Talmud Torah Perek, the fifth chapter of the Laws of Torah Study. Kashem Shada Mitzvah B'chvod Aviv. Just as someone is commanded regarding honoring their father, Uvi Yirato, and being in awe of him, Kahu Hayav B'chvod Ribo Uvi Yirato. Likewise, he's commanded to be to honor and to be in awe of his Rav. V'ribo, Yeter mi'aviv, and his Rav even more than his father. Why? She'aviv hevi'o l'chayei ha'olam hazeh, for his father brought him into this world. V'rabo shelimdo chochma, and his master, his teacher, his Rav, who taught him wisdom, hevi'o l'chayei ha'olam haba, brought him into the world, the next world, brings him to deserve the next world. Ra'a avedat aviv avedat ribo. If he saw that his father lost something and his rabbi lost something. Shel ribo kodemet shel aviv. That of his Rav takes precedence over that of his father. I should mention here that when we say, and he'll mention this further on, that the Rav that we're talking about here isn't just any rabbi, but the one who is his primary teacher. Aviv v'ribo nosim b'masa. If both his father and his Rav are carrying a load, then maniach et shel ribo v'achar kach shel aviv. He should first help his Rav unload and then his father. Aviv v'ribo shvuim b'shivya. If both his father and his Rav are prisoners, podeat ribo v'achar kach podeat aviv. First he should redeem his Rav and then his father. V'im haya aviv talmid hachamim. But if his father was a Torah scholar, podeat aviv tchila, then he should give precedence to his father. V'chenim haya aviv hacham. Likewise, if he was a wise, if he was as wise as a scholar, even though he's not comparable really to his Rav in terms of wisdom, then mishiv avedato v'harkach mishiv avedat ribo. Then he should preferably take care of his father first and then his Rav. V'ein lach kavod, and there's no honor except for gadol mikvod harav, that is greater than that's due to the Rav. V'lo mora yeter mimora harav, nor is there awe greater than that due to the Rav. Amru hachamim mora ribach ki mora shamayim. The sages said that the awe in which you hold your Rav is like that you should hold heaven in. Lefikach hamru, therefore they said, kol ha'cholek al ribo. Anybody who disagrees publicly with his Rav, keholek al shechina. It's as if he's disagreeing with heaven, with the divine presence, literally. Shnei Amar, as it says, batzotam al Hashem, that they argued with God, and this is with respect to the people in the desert. When they were leaving the desert, they were arguing with Moshe. V'chol ha'oseh mriva im ribo, and anybody who argues with his Rav, ke'oseh im hashchina, it's like he's arguing with heaven. Shnei Amar, as it says, asher rabu b'nei Yisrael et Hashem. And this is the same place, the same conversation as before, where the people had argued with God. V'chol hamitra'em al ribo, k'mitra'em al shechina, and anybody who argues excessively with his Rav is like this, doing that with God. Shnei Amar, as it says, lo aleinu tlunotechem ki al Hashem. Moshe upbraids the people, saying, Your argument isn't with us, but with God. Anybody who thinks of leharher is to consider, but in this context, it means thinking perhaps that the person is wrong and doubting them. So anyone who doubts his Rav, likewise, it's like he's doubting God. Shneimar, as it says, v'daber ha'am be'Elohim uveMoshe, that the people spoke against God and Moshe. So God came first in that sentence. Ezu holek al ribo. What do we mean? Someone who disagrees with his Rav, who not disagrees really, but makes an argument that's in disagreement with that of his Rav. זה שקובע לו מדרש ויושב ודורש ומלמד שלא ברשות ריבו. It's somebody, for example, who establishes a Beit Midrash and sits and does teaching in the Midrash without his Rav's permission. V'ribo kayam, while his Rav is still alive. And this is the case even if his Rav is in a different city. And it's forbidden for a person to give halachic advice, to establish halacha in front of his Rav, which doesn't mean in front of him literally, it means while he's around. Le'olam, forever. V'kol ha'moreh halacha b'fnei rabo hayav mitah. And anybody who does do that is liable for death. Obviously, not an actual death sentence, but it means he should be worthy of death. Hayab beno uvenu ribo shneim asar mil. If there were 12 kilometers, 12 Roman miles, but it's essentially a kilometer, between him and his Rav. V'sha'al lo adam dvar halacha. And somebody asked him a question in halacha. In that case, mutar lashiv. He's permitted to give him an answer. Ula'afrish min ha'isur, on the other hand, to separate somebody from something that's forbidden, afilu bifnei ribo mutar lehorot. Even if it's in front of his Rav, it's permissible for him to do this. Ketzad. What do we mean? כגון שראה אדם עושה דבר האסור מפני שלא ידע באיסורו או מפני רשעו. For example, a person saw he saw somebody doing something forbidden because he didn't know that it was forbidden or because he was just a bad person. יש לו להפרישו. The person has permission to separate him from the bad deed. V'lomar lo davar ze asur, and to tell him that's what you're doing is forbidden. V'afilu bifnei ribo, and even in front of his master. V'af al pi shelo natan lo ribo reshut, and this is the case even if his Rav did not give him permission to do so. Why? Shekol makom sheyesh hilul Hashem ein holkin kavod larav. For any place where there is the possibility of a desecration of God's name, we don't concern ourselves with honoring the Rav. B'midvarim amurim, in which case are we considering? B'davar shenikro nikra. If something just sort of happened. Aval likboa atzmo lehora'ah uleishev ulehorot lekol sho'el. But if he establishes a permanent presence as a Rav and is sitting and giving halachic advice to anybody who asks, afilu hu b'sof ha'olam, even if he's on the other end of the world from his Rav, v'ribo b'sof ha'olam, and his Rav is on the other end of the world. Asur lo le'orot ad sheyamut ribo, ele im ken natal reshut miribo. It's forbidden for him to do this until his Rav dies or has given him permission to give halachic advice. ולא כל מי שמת ריבו מותר לו לשב ולהורות בתורה. And not everybody whose whose Rav has died is permitted to sit and to give halachic advice. אלא אם כן היה תלמיד שהגיע להוראה. He's only permitted if he's a student who has achieved the level of what's called hora'ah, which means that he knows all of the halacha and he's able to answer correctly. וכל תלמיד שלא הגיע להוראה, and any student who didn't achieve this level of hora'ah, umore, but nevertheless does act as a rav, הרי זה שוטה רשע וגס רוח. He's an evil idiot and a windbag. ועליו נאמר, and of him it said, כי רבים חללים הפילה, that this is a portion of the statement, that many dead have been caused by this. וכן חכם שהגיע להוראה, likewise a sage who did achieve the level of hora'ah, ve'eno more, but he doesn't sit and give halachic advice. הרי זה מונע Torah. This person is preventing Torah from being spread. ונותן מכשולות לפני העיוורים, and he's putting stumbling blocks in front of the blind. ועליו נאמר, and of him it said, ועצומים כל הרוגיה, and continuing the previous verse of Mishlei, and many are the ones who were killed, the ones it killed. אלו התלמידים הקטנים שלא הרבו תורה כראוי. Those minor students, not minor in age, but lesser students, I should say. Those lesser students who didn't learn enough Torah. והם מבקשים להתגדל בפני עמי הארץ ובין אנשי עירם. And they're seeking to aggrandize themselves in front of the ordinary people and the residents of their city. וקופצים ויושבים בראש לדון ולהורות בישראל. And they jump ahead in order to sit at the front to render judgment amongst Israel. הם המרבים את המחלוקות. They're the ones who increase dissent. והם המחריבים את העולם, and they're the ones who destroy the world. ומכבים נרה של התורה, and they extinguish the light of the Torah. ומחבלים כרם השם צבאות, and they're the ones who destroy the vineyard of the Lord God. ועליהם אמר שלמה בחוכמתו, and of them Shlomo said in his wisdom, in Shir HaShirim, אחזו לנו שועלים קטנים מחבלים כרמים. We've been beset upon by foxes, by small foxes who are destroying the vineyards. ואסור לו לתלמיד לקרות לרבו בשמו. It's forbidden for a person to call his Rav by his name, his personal name. ואפילו שלא בפניו, even if he's not present. ולא יזכיר שמו בפניו, nor should he mention his name in front of him. ואפילו לקרות לאחרים ששמם כשם ריבו, or to call others whose name is similar to that of his Rav, כדרך שעושים בשם אביו, just as he would not do it with respect to his father's name. אלא ישנה שמם, rather he should change their name. ואפילו להרמותם, and even after their death. והוא שיהיה השם פלי. This is the case if their name is unusual. שכל השומע ידע שהוא פלוני, that anybody who hears that name would know that it's so and so. ולא ייתן שלום לריבו. In other words, it wouldn't, if the name is Avraham and Moshe or something like that, that's an ordinary name, it's okay. But if his name was, I don't know, Yehoshaphat or something that's a more unusual name, he's not allowed to use it. ולא ייתן שלום לריבו או יחזיר לו שלום, and he shouldn't greet his Rav or return his greeting, כדרך שנותנים הרעים, u'mahazirin ze leze, like ordinary friends would do one to the other, ela shohei lefanav, rather he should bow before him, ve'omer lo b'yir'a v'chavod shalom alecha rabbi, and he should and say to him with awe and honor, peace upon you, my master. V'im natan lo ribo shalom, and if his Rav greeted him, yahazir lo shalom alecha rabbi umori, he should return, he should respond to him, peace upon you, my master and teacher. V'chen lo yachlotz tefilav bifnei ribo, likewise he shouldn't remove his tefillin in front of his Rav. V'lo yasev ela yoshev keyoshev lifnei hamelech, and he shouldn't lean while he's sitting, but rather he should sit like one would sit in front of a king. V'lo yitpalel lifnei rabo v'lo la'achar ribo v'lo b'tzad ribo, nor should he pray in front of or behind or on the side of his Rav. Ve'en tzarich lomar, and needless to say, she'asur lo la'alach b'tzido, that it's forbidden for him to walk by his side. Ela yitrachek la'achar ribo, rather he should stand behind him. V'lo yehe mechuvan keneged achurav, and he shouldn't be positioning himself right behind his rear. V'harkach yitpalel, and then pray. In other words, he should be off to the side and behind when he's praying, so he's not directly behind him. V'lo yikanes im ribo lemerhatz, nor should he go into a bathhouse with his Rav. Remember that in the day, people didn't have internal plumbing. They would take baths in a communal bathhouse, and people were naked there. Lo yeshev b'makom ribo, he should not sit in the ordinary place where his Rav would sit. V'lo yachri'a dvarav b'fanav, nor should he twist his words in front of him. V'lo yistor et dvarav, nor contradict him. V'lo yeshev lefanav, nor sit in front of him, ad sheomer lo shev, until he tells him to sit. V'lo ya'amod milfanav, ad sheomer lo amod, nor should he stand in front of him until he tells him stand. O ad she'itol reshut la'amod, or until he requests permission from the Rav to be able to stand. U'chsheyipater mirabo, and when he takes leave of his Rav, lo yahazir lo acharav, he shouldn't turn his back on him. Ela nilta le'achorav, ufanav keneged panav. Rather, he should retreat from him while his face is facing him, like one does in a Bet Knesset when the Torah is present. V'hayav la'amod bifnei ribo, and he must stand in front of his Rav. Mishir eno merachok mlo einav, once he can see him as far as his eyes could see him. Ad shitkaseh mimeno v'lo yir'eh komato, until he's concealed from his vision. V'harkach yeshev, and then he can sit. V'hayav adam lehakbil et pnei rabo b'regel, and a person is required to visit his Rav on the holidays, the three regalim. That would be Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot. En holkin kavod letalmid bifnei Rav. We don't honor the student in front of his teacher. Ela im ken haya derech ribo lahlok lo kavod, unless it was the practice of the Rav to honor his student. V'chol melachot she'ha'eved oseh l'ribo, and all of the tasks which the servant would do for his master, talmid oseh l'ribo, a student would do to his Rav. V'im haya b'makom she'en makirin oto, and if they were in some place where nobody knows who he is, v'lo hayu lo tefillin v'hash shema yomru evedhu, and he didn't have tefillin on his head, so he was concerned that people might say he was a slave. Eno no'el lo minalo, then he should not put on the Rav's shoes, v'lo holzo, and not take them off. These were the things which servants would do for their masters back in the day. V'chol hamonea talmido mil shamsho, and anybody who prevents his student, his disciple, from providing services to him. Monea mimeno chesed. He's preventing a kindness from him. Uporek mimeno yirat shamayim. And he's causing him to lessen his fear of heaven. וכל תלמיד שמזלזל בדבר מכל כבוד ריבו, גורם לשכינה שתסתלק מישראל. And any student who is not careful with any of these matters of honoring his Rav causes the divine presence to leave from amongst the Jews. Ra'at ribo over al divrei Torah. If he saw that his Rav was transgressing the Torah, Omer lo limatanu rabbeinu kach v'kach. He should say to him, instead of saying, hey, you're transgressing, he should say, you taught us such and such, our teacher. B'kol zman shemazkir shemu'a bifanav, and anytime he mentions something that he learned in front of his Rav, Omer lo kach limatanu rabbeinu. This is what you taught us, Rabbeinu. V'al yomar davar shelo shem'a mirabo, ad sheyazkir shem omro. And he shouldn't mention anything that he did not hear from his Rav until he mentions whoever said it. This is lest the Rav think that he came up with it himself. And when his Rav dies, kore'a kol begadav, he should tear all of his clothes, ad shu megale et libo, until he exposes his heart, ve'eno me'achel le'olam, and he may not repair the tear forever. And this is the same thing that he would do for his parents. B'mid dvarim amorim, what cases are we considering? As I mentioned at the beginning, b'ribo amuvhak shelamad mimenu rov chachmato. We're talking about his exceptional teacher from whom he learned most of his wisdom. Aval im lo lamad mimenu rov chachmato. But if he didn't learn most of his wisdom from this Rav, harazit talmid haver, then this Rav is considered what's called a talmid haver, which I don't know how you would actually translate it. I guess an associate student. Ve'eno haya bichvodo b'chol advarim ha'elu, and he doesn't have to give him all of these measures of honor that we mentioned. Aval omed milfanav, but he stands before him. Ve'korea alav kishem shu korea al kol hametim shu mitabel aleihem. And nevertheless, he should tear his garments like he would for anybody who he's required to be mitabel, to mourn. Afilu lo lamad mimeno elu davar ahad. Even if he only learned from him one thing, ben katan ben gadol, even if whether it's a minor thing or a major thing, omed milfanav, he should stand in front of him, v'koreh alav, and tear when the person passes. V'chol talmid hachamim shede'otav mechuvanot, eno medaber bifnei mi shehu gadol mimenu bechokhmah. And any Torah scholar who is properly learned, who has proper personality development, should not speak in front of somebody who's greater than him in wisdom. Af al pi shelo lamad mimenu klum, even though he learned nothing at all from him. Harav hamuvhak sheratza limchol al kvodo b'chol advarim ha'elu. The specific Rav that we're talking about, that he learned most of his exceptional Rav, that he learned most of his wisdom from, who decided he didn't want to, he was willing to forego all of this honor stuff. O behad mehem, or just one of the things, l'chol talmidav, o lehad mehem, for all of his students or for just one of them. Harashut biyado, he has permission to do that. Va'af al pi shemahal, hayav talmid lehadro, and even though the Rav forgave all these honor things, nevertheless the student has to beautify him. In other words, to behave nicely, behave well towards him. V'afilu b'sha'a shemahal, even at the time when he forgave this behavior. כשם שהתלמידים חייבים בכבוד הרב, just as the students are required to honor the Rav, כך הרב צריך לכבד את תלמידיו ולקרבן. So too, the Rav has to honor his students and to bring them closer. כך אמרו חכמים, this is what our sages said. יהיה כבוד תלמידך חביב עליך כשל לחבריך. The honor of your students should be precious to you just as that of your friends is. וצריך אדם להיזהר בתלמידיו, and a person has to be careful about his students, ולהבן שהם הבנים המהנים בעולם הזה ולעולם הבא. For they are his children, his sons, who derive benefit in this world and in the next world because of his teachings. התלמידים מוסיפין חוכמת הרב. Students increase the wisdom of the teacher. ומרחיבין ליבו, and they expand his heart, literally make him more understanding. אמרו חכמים, the sages said, הרבה חוכמה למדתי מחבריי, יותר מרבותיי. I learned a great deal of wisdom. I learned a great deal of wisdom from my associates more than I did from my teachers. ומתלמידיי יותר מכולם. And from my students more than from anyone else. וכשם שעץ קטן מדליק את הגדול, and just as a small piece of wood can light a large piece of wood, כך תלמיד קטן מחדד את הרב. Likewise, a student who's of little learning nevertheless sharpens the teacher. עד שיוצא ממנו בשאלותיו חוכמה מפוארה. Until through his questions he causes great wisdom to come forth. That's the end of Perek Hey. Perek Vav we will not get to until the end of January because I will be traveling.